Before we get started with our usual shenanigans to start the show, I wanted to let you all know about how important this episode is, at least to us, about the impact of burnout working in sports can have on you, how it can affect your relationships with your family, friends, and the people you love, how it can consume you. But more refreshingly, we want to present some more positive news. You're not alone feeling this way. There is actual research that proves that what you're feeling and thinking is not a figment of your imagination. It is very real. Today's episode features an insightful interview with Dr. Matt Huml, an associate professor at the University of Cincinnati, where he teaches sport administration courses in the College of Education, Criminal Justice, and Human Services. He is also on the forefront of the work issues that people working in college sports face every day. We ran across a piece in Sportico he and Dr. Elizabeth Taylor wrote in 2022 titled, "Why Employees Are Fleeing the College Athletics Industry," and quickly chased down the rabbit hole of his work, which explains a lot about the current state of the business. We identified with his research, we personified it, and we wanted to talk with him. In 2019, he helped write a groundbreaking study titled Workaholism in Sport, a Mediated Model of Work-Family Conflict and Burnout, which detailed the conflict that many of us have faced doing a job that we were passionate about. He's also studied remote work for college athletic department personnel. He's done research on the spouses of sports workers, and recently published a study called Working to Live or Living to Work, How Daily Work Experiences Affect Sport Employees' Biometric Health. We'll talk about that more in our interview, but we're super excited to share this episode with you, and we are extremely grateful to Dr. Huml for his time and insight. We think it is important for everyone to hear what he has to say. We hope you enjoy it. This is the true story of two washed-up sports guys who chased the dream, private flights, championship rings, running sideline to sideline on per diem and adrenaline.
We gave our 20s and our 30s to the industry, pulled off miracles that were never in the job description. In return, low pay, long hours, and we still got cut from the team.
This is about what really happens behind the badge. The burnout, the bad bosses, the dream job that didn't love you back, but also the lifelong friendships, the chaos, the holy shit stories you couldn't make up. And somehow, despite everything, you'd still do parts of it all over again.
This is one for the ones who lived it, loved it, hated it, and still kind of miss it. For everyone who's ever asked, how in the hell did we survive that? We're two former sports insiders with more than 40 years of experience and more than enough scars to make fun of it all.
And just enough trauma to start a podcast instead of going to therapy.
I'm Brandon Barca.
And I'm Andy Boggs.
And this is No Longer Credentialed. We once had access, now we have opinions. Today, we're joined by someone who actually did the homework on why working in sports feels like it's slowly eroding your soul. While we were busy sleeping in the press boxes, missing weddings, Dr. Matt Huml was busy conducting one of the most comprehensive studies on burnout in college athletics.
Matt's an associate professor at the University of Cincinnati and one of the lead authors of a study titled Workaholism in Sport, a Mediated Model of Work, Family Conflict, and Burnout. He surveyed over 4,400 college athletics employees from Power 5 to Division 3 to figure out how many of us are working ourselves into emotional exhaustion. And more importantly, why? His research found that workaholism, the obsessive, guilt-driven need to work way beyond your job description, is a direct line to burnout. And when that work starts bleeding into your personal life, things get worse fast.
We're going head first into the culture of overwork in sports, the myths we still believe about loving the grind, and what it actually takes to build a healthier career and maybe even a life in the industry.
Dr. Matt Huml, welcome to No Longer Credentialed. So I want to get...
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. We're so jacked to talk to you. I think I want to get started. Your study included surveying over 4,000 college athletics employees, bringing light to something so many of us have felt for a long time in the industry, but not spoken publicly about: burnout and workaholism. What were some of your other key findings?
Yeah, and like I said, thanks for the invitation to kind of get started and to give a little bit of background here of this is going back to like 2017. I got together with a good colleague of mine, Liz Taylor, who, if any of you guys look me up or look up any of these articles, you'll notice Dr. Taylor and I are often writing together on these. But at the time, we were talking about trying to talk to women leaders in sport and how if there's anything been done in that area. And then we decided to kind of broaden it out to just talk about general human resource topics. We wanted to ask about how often people take leave from work and how supportive work is and all that. And we asked some basic stuff that now I look back on as like, okay, that probably wasn't the best approach, but man, it was like opening up just like this Pandora's box of people were getting asked what felt like probably for them the first time about what their work experience was like in college sport. And we just got this deluge of information from all over the top. And I remember we had a very broad opening of like, hey, if there's anything related to your work experience that you want to talk about, like let us know. And it was just, like I said, it was an avalanche of people probably feeling very pent up, frustrated, burnt out, annoyed, just overwhelmed. And we were kind of like putting a microphone and letting them talk into this box without feeling like there was be any recourse at work. And that kind of kicked off like the last 8 years of us just looking into it because we just kind of got exposed to all that.
Give us a little bit of background on the surveying. How did that happen? Was it all electronic? What were some of the questions that were asked for you to really uncover a lot of these things that are happening in the industry?
Yeah, not to get too academic nerd scholarly here, but it's talking about like how is one, most schools have like a staff directory. So if you look up like University of Oregon, for example, you can go up there and they'll have a staff directory that has a list of everyone's names and emails and their titles. And I guess being comprehensive as I am, we built a private database that had everyone's information. So that way we could send it out and collect it. And then it saved us from getting information that like if Joe Smith is at Oregon, I don't have to know who that is. It already tells me what school they're going to be at, what the title is, because we already collected that information. And then it was really just about sending that out. Now, topic-wise, you guys talked a little bit about, we did burnout. And so in the very beginning, what was especially important to us was like burnout and what's called work-family conflict. And to give some quick background on that, work-family conflict is essentially when work conflicts with family. You also have family work conflict where family can conflict with work. So you have these dynamics of this give and take between work and family. And for the audience out there, family doesn't necessarily imply like that you have a spouse and you have kids. It could be aging parents. It could be that you have a really close, large family. It could be that you live far away from family. Like all these things can create conflict that you have to manage, that all of us have to manage every day. But the problem is sport is so pervasive, so dominant of your time. And so we knew ahead of time going in that college sport employees were having probably a higher level of conflict than a traditional job because it's not just working 8 to 5. It's because Oregon's playing at 10 o'clock Pacific time, but then you also have another team that's playing at noon the next day, Eastern time. And it's because sport is entertainment. It needs to be during entertainment hours. And that usually means it has to be occurring when people are home, when they can absorb or consume that entertainment. And it just stretches the limitations of what people would have. So we knew that that entertainment component was going to be the key component, that those employees then had to work entertainment hours, but also were navigating the gears of life and growing families and choices and important moments that they had to decide if they were going to miss or go to. And it showed up in a lot of the comments, and I'm happy to get to, but I don't want to jump too far ahead.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the layers of the onions of us talking and doing this podcast is there's so many of us have left really, really talented people at the highest levels of, at least in my, experience of college sports, and they just left. And I just think this research kind of just personifies all of that. And because it really comes down to you start having a family and you just don't have the time anymore to work 14 hours a day, or you feel guilty for doing that. So just in your research, have you noticed shifts? Are there more people leaving, or just kind of talk about that?
Andy, to go to your comment, I still remember our first survey. We just had an open box at the end. Tell us about anything. And I still remember the very first survey that was completed was a guy, and obviously I don't know who it was, but it was in all caps, which I think added to the comedy and the morbidity of what he was saying. But it was something about like, we are living the dream. Life couldn't be going better. My family lives 20 hours away, but we're all sacrificing, and this is amazing. And I was just like, this guy is telling me that his family lives 20 hours away. With technology, you can get in a lot of places quickly, like 20 hours. And I was just thinking, like, this person's completely separated from their family, but to him, this is as good as it gets. And to me, it was just like there was a level of an acceptance that had been reached there that was beyond the pale, beyond the comprehension. But we've also had comments from people that have said, like, hey, me and my spouse have decided that we're not going to have kids while we're working here. Or we've had people comment to say that I have to pack my spouse at the second we become pregnant, that we're like essentially going to put our 2 weeks in, or we're going to wait till the kid's here, and then we're going to like quickly like rotate out. And then we had people on the other end, like that were senior leadership, that reflecting back of like, yeah, I got divorced because I worked in sports, or my kids are like totally alienated from me. And now I realize it now that I'm like near the end of my career, that I've sacrificed so much for something that's going to quickly replace me. And then I'll just be left with a decent retirement account. But all those memories and experiences and days are long gone, and I'll never get those back. And so we just saw like all these really wild family dynamics across the lifespan of people that were having to deal with that. But now on the retention piece, I can tell you that I was talking to a former University of Cincinnati employee. Again, I got work here at University of Cincinnati. He was an athletic department employee. And we were just talking about, we wanted to do a presentation, I think for NACDA, and hopefully your audience knows what NACDA is, but
all too well.
And so we were going to talk about like, hey, here's the researcher telling you, but here's someone that actually left, and talking about attrition concerns and all that. But I still remember we sat down and talked, and she was like, yeah, and there's a lot of people gone that when I was here. And so she had been there, I think 5 years. So I was like, okay, can you think back, like how many people in the athletic department do you think are still here when you started? And we figured out that it was 5%.
Whoa.
So it was like 95% of people that she started with 5 years ago were gone. And I was like, man, can you imagine? And that's what led to, we did an article with Sportico on why employees are fleeing the college athletic industry. And it was like, wow. So since we had the private database from a couple of years ago, I decided to just do a quick sample of like 20 random schools, D1, D2, D3. And we tried to see how much turnover there was. And it was excessively high. I think it was twice as high as any higher education or corporate America background. Wow. So it was like, hey, if you go into athletics, you're twice as likely to not be working in the same place 5 years from now as you would if you went to any other traditional, consistent, or similar industries. And to me, it was like, yeah, there's a whole lot of things that you guys are probably experienced, but I think there's a lot of culture in college sport that you're just expected to go somewhere else. That's how you have to move up the food chain, is you have to go to another school to get that title, and then you go to the next school, and but that just makes life really hard to always have to be on the move.
Boggs, this is something we do in the industry. So you're speaking our language, and Boggsy and I work together at the same place here in Nashville, gosh, for over a decade. And we used to always thumb back to the back of, the media guides that you guys always put together in comms, Boggs. Those were just always so great to look at, like high school
Pulitzer
yearbooks.
Prize winning.
And we flip all the way to the back, and like, oh, there's the staff directory with all of the pictures of who's here and who's not. And we just remember looking maybe 5 years into it and going back, and you're right. I mean, it's jarring. It's to think about all the faces that have changed. And, while you're in the middle of it, part of you is thinking like, oh, okay, this happens in any business, right? There's always going to be turnover. But Matt, to hear you say that it's at such a higher rate makes sense. And workaholism is celebrated in sports, and it really is quietly destroying a lot of people. And so we're really fascinated by this work that you're doing. What's the most alarming thing you uncovered?
Oh man. Well, okay. So two things come to mind from that statement. One, you're talking about the cultural expectation or pressure. It's like there's like a badge of honor of like putting in the most hours, and it's not just one place. It's just culture. It's like industry wide. But I remember I got really frustrated that I kept reading articles like if a coach was having a poor season. That I remember Kevin Wilson, who was the Indiana football coach way back, I think a handful of coaches ago, But he had a quote of something. I was like, yeah, next year we're just going to work harder. And I'm like, we've got to realize that the answer isn't just that we're not throwing enough time down this well. We're acting like this is an endless resource that we can give. And so I started reading more and more quotes, and it just became more and more frustrating. So I had a bunch of data where I asked people, like, how many hours are you working in season? How many hours are you working out of season? I wanted to see, like, hey, are the people that are telling us that are working the most hours, are they actually seeing the most success from team success? Whether it's, I think we boiled this down to coaches and just like the ADs. Were you getting more director cut points? Was your team seeing more postseason success? We found out it was not, and there was no correlation whatsoever with time commitment. And while it wasn't significant, it was trending negative. That the people that were saying they were spending the most hours, while not significant, they were getting less success on average at a random sample than even the people that said they weren't. And that felt validating in a sense of like, we can't think that Nick Saban is this great coach because he's somehow giving 95 hours when everyone else is only able to do 91 hours in a week. That isn't the answer. Now, the saddest or the toughest part is something that we did just a couple years ago. We sent smartwatches, like if anyone does Fitbits, or I think there's, I don't want to go down to, I'll sound like an idiot trying to guess the other ones, but we sent Fitbits to employees and we asked them to wear them 24/7 for like a month. And we asked them every day, like what their day experience was, a really short survey. And so we got all kinds of data about sleep quality, steps, what your heart rate variability is, which I found out my wife's a PT, that heart rate variability is good. That means you're like doing exercise, so you raise your heart rate and you went down. And so we got data. We just had a paper published on that talking about that actually and I guess here's the good side. The good side is we found out if you have a positive day, you're actually getting more benefits than you would from a negative day. So it's kind of like if you have a good day, it's actually more beneficial than the detriment of a negative. But on top of that, we actually have had one of our participants die of a serious medical condition, and they were a very well-known person in the field. And like that really stuck to me. Is like, here was someone, we're studying their physical health, and the study finished, but they ended up dying of a significant health episode like a year after. And it's just been like sticking with me of like, just here's someone that obviously signed up and was willing to because they feel like that their work was affecting their health, and it truly came to form.
Yeah, I think, Barkin, at least for me, I've kind of gotten to an existential point in my life of, was all that stuff worth it? I don't mean to get personal, but it's you go back and you think about all of those things and all of those hours, and the burnout is real. And I think that's kind of what, Barkin and I kind of started this podcast, because the burnout's real and people get hurt and people, they lose their jobs, then they don't know what to do. I mean, I've just seen so many people just leave the business, and I just think there's so many reasons why, but I think that's a main reason why. It's just too hard. And then it's also all that the culture is just celebrated, which drives me insane. Can you give us a difference between what the workaholism looks like and what burnout? Is there a point there where it kind of flips, or have you noticed in your research, was there a moment?
Conceptually, thinking about like workaholism and burnout think about workaholism as the symptom and the outcome as burnout. And like workaholism is just this struggle to detach, that you just can't move on from work. And in a lot of ways, college athletics is designed to make workaholism a rampant issue, because you guys have to be on call at any time. At any time, someone could email you or text you or call you, and you're expected to answer. And it probably is an emergency that needs to be taken care of right away, even though you probably later will then mumble under your breath that wasn't an emergency situation. The problem is there's people that have an incredible amount of power. I can't speak to any of your institutions, but I'm sure like there's head football coaches and ADs and certain senior deputy admins that have an incredible amount of power that can make people do whatever they need to. And so then you also have an unchecked situation along those lines. And then everything is also indoctrinated that it's for the culture, it's for winning, it's for whatever. There's a lot of cult of the culture within sport, especially within every school has their. I say this in the nicest way, but as a stupid saying that's like, hey, this is our thing, like this is who we are, or everyone has an acronym. But all of it's built around like buying into the system, that that the only way we can win is if we're all rowing in the same direction. Like there's lots of stuff along those lines. But I've seen some researchers do some sociological crossovers of cult and sport, which is probably a little scary to read.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, it's just more of like, Now, workaholism is something that we all can be exposed to. Some of us have behaviors that make us at greater risk of workaholism. But burnout also, like you sometimes can have certain things that protect you. Like we actually found out, and this is again an example, work-family conflict can actually help protect you because it's family kind of pushing back, and it kind of keeps you centered in some ways. Obviously, conflict itself is not good, but if it's helping keep you kind of moderated in between those two things, it can help avoid some of the workaholism. But to me itself, like burnout just creates all the negatives, like depression, tons of social behavioral issues, decisions to leave. There's tons of, like we said, there's tons of turnover. Burnout creates that. It also can create a ton of physical health issues that we're trying to look into right now. But there's all kinds of negatives. Like there's no positives for burnout. There's some people that things that can connect to workaholism that can be good in some ways. But burnout is just like I don't say this like it. There's no positive to burnout. It's just going to cause and wreck a lot of things for you individually and then the people around you.
I think with me personally, not to unpack too much stuff about my story, but the things you're saying are accurate. I was addicted to the job for 20 years. I've gone through burnout 2 or 3 different times to where I've left the industry to where because I thought it was going to put me 6 feet under. And there's this emotional high that comes with the job. Obviously, if you love sports and working in sports, it's so cool. You're traveling with the team. You're going to some of the coolest facilities. You have all this access. You're working with the most powerful people on campus and the head coaches, and all of the people in your friends and family want to know about your job. And so there really is this identity thing. And it's not to say that everybody has an ego about it, but subconsciously it's there, right? And at least from my case, I know internally, like, hey, this probably isn't right, but the addiction and the obsessiveness to over everything, over family, over trying to climb the ladder, trying to do 4 jobs at once if you're understaffed, because you feel like that's what you need to do to win, like you said, and show value. And in my case, it ended up in self-destruction. And so, I lost certain jobs and obviously it destroyed my family as well. And there's a lot of guilt about it that I let that happen. I mean, did you get a sense from some of your surveys that people feel the guilt and they feel the stress, but they're too addicted to leave the job, right? And ultimately it leads to self-destruction. I mean, those are probably some of the extreme cases.
So I can speak to that because it hits on a whole bunch of great topics that we've covered in here and some other people. So there's some other researchers in our area like Brent OJ and Nathan Bayer and Claire Zovek that have looked at passion. Passion is like really important in sports. Like a lot of us want to go into this because it's something to get that you can get really tied up in a good way. Like the motivation you can feel for working college sport is tough to replicate in other places. And I can speak to a future study we're working on right now as we interviewed a bunch of people that left college sport. And we wanted to talk to them about like, why'd you leave? And tell us a little bit about that. And we're looking at the perception of moral injury about people that feel, I guess to give some background on moral injury. Moral injury is often kind of tied into like soldiers, like you go on the front lines and then you become disenchanted of like what your country fighting for, like a lot of Vietnam veterans kind of feeling like maybe disillusioned about what they signed up for. But that also ties into healthcare. Sometimes you're trying to save people's lives and you're fighting with insurance companies about what's right and wrong. We're extending that out to see college sport is seeing a lot of that people signed up because they're so passionate about sport, but then they become disillusioned about where college sport is going or the involvement of NIL or the House settlement or what administration wants to do. But even with these people that were telling us, I'm so grateful to be out. Like one of our questions was like, would you ever go back? And it was like, you could hear the trepidation. And some people were like, never going back. Never.
Yeah.
Other people, even though the whole time they were talking about how terrible the experience was, like, oh yeah, if the right opportunity comes up, I'd love to get back in.
We're both of those cases.
Yeah.
Andy's the one.
There's no way.
Or hell no.
I would never go back. Ever.
I'm like, you know what? Maybe there's a chance if it's the right situation. I'm a junkie.
Yeah. And there's lots of breakdown, like we're writing the paper, but some of it is people are purposely creating like an unrealistic situation that they know will never occur. Some of them are like, they haven't been coaching for 5 years. Like, well, if I become an offensive coordinator, Power 5. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen. They may know that, but they're not willing to admit it. But they're like, okay, well, as long as that never happens, then I'll never feel the urge to get back in. But it just speaks to, it's such a passionate field that it makes people feel alive in some ways. and it's tough to let go. And for example, I remember we had one person we interviewed that was now a teacher, and he's like, I can't tell you how much better my life is. I get paid more to be a teacher. And we all complain about how low teacher salaries are, and I'm getting paid more, and I can walk away at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and no one bothers me. And then he writes, but it's different when the person that's your colleague that's like, yeah, I got 2 more years and I'm done. He's like, that would never happen in college sport. Everybody would be so bought in, you wouldn't be talking about how many years you have left. And so he was just speaking to, there's something about us all like having such a challenging but fulfilling life that I'm not getting in another industry. And so that's the give and take about trying to get out.
One thing you said was in your survey, why did you leave? Another alarming thing to me, Andy, you can chime in on this, but that question is not being asked in exit interviews when people are leaving this industry. And it's either they just don't want to know or they don't care. And so thankful for that you are asking these questions, because it's terrifying. I don't know if you want to jump in on that, Andy.
Yeah, I think just listening to you talk like that, what's the breaking point? Is there a breaking point where people just see what's happening, like young people at, age 17 who love sports, but they hear about all of these things that are bad things happen, and do they just like, it's not something I want to do? I don't know is there a breaking point at all? And I mean, I have so many questions about leadership and, how, is there a way to change the culture?
I might leave that last question for a second, but yeah, it's something I'm studying that connects to this is calling, that a lot of us feel beckoned to do this. This is what our skills, our passion align into what we're doing. And my favorite research article is on zookeepers, and it's talking about how zookeepers, even though they're paid terrible, their hours are terrible, they're at the whim of an animal that needs them at any time, at any place, that they just can't let go because it's just, they care so much about animals. And to me, sport aligns with that, because I feel like if you wrangled up like a bunch of like third graders and you asked them what they want to do in their life, a bunch of them would have a sport related thing. They want to be an athlete. They want to work in sport. They care so much about the Reds, the Bengals, or whatever, that it's part of their identity in a way that being a financial accountant could never be to them at that age, because there's just no connection to that. And it's the good and bad is then that calling, we have found, provides some protection. Like if you are really have a high level of calling, that you are protected from some burnout, that you can lean on that calling in a way that protects you from other negatives related to your work. Now there's limits to that. We have found out that like if you work in a terrible work environment, which athletics sometimes is loud and proud about, that it removes some of the benefits of calling, but that provides some of that. And I think to answer your last part about why do we see such an issue, why does no one care when one leaves? I think the problem is there's thousands of people that are eager to replace
100%.
you. But this speaks to like, if I was talking to administrators like, hey, like explain to me why I should care about keeping these people when there's so many eager people to do this. And I'd say, like, you guys have been in the culture business, so you can't act like losing people doesn't matter to you. If you're in the culture business, you got to be 10 toes in and actually build culture. But I would argue that athletics builds culture around sport, not about athletics. Like the actual performance on the field is where culture matters, but we don't do a whole lot of building off the field and for the people that are there every day. Because you guys, and I speak that for the industry, are just viewed as more replaceable than any 5-star quarterback ever would be.
That's so true, what you're saying about all of that. And it's 300, 400 people apply for your gig, and guess what? They'll do it for a lot less than what you're getting paid. And especially in Ohio, when they've got these at-will sort of contracts with employees, they can just let you go tomorrow, and that's that, and replace it and cut budget. And there's not a real culture within, at least everybody has different experiences in the industry, but that is really trying to nurture someone from entry level all the way up to however far they go within the system. And you see a lot of people leaving, and in the profession, it's pretty widely known that if you want to work your way up, you got to move around a lot. That's just part of the business. But when we talk about all of this, you mentioned in your survey, you've had some responses from senior leadership. Do you think that ADs and VPs, they actually really, do they understand the toll that this culture is taking on people? Or is it they understand it and they've just got their heads in the sand?
Yeah, so good question. Going back to that, one thing I would say is athletics probably has, it's still not very good. It's not very ethical, but I understand why they're looking at frontline entry level employees as fungible resources. Like, hey, if you don't want to do this, we'll find someone else that's willing to do it. I think the lie they tell themselves is about middle management and up, because we've interviewed a ton of people that have left that said, like, hey, when I left, I asked for $5,000 in a title and they said no, and then I found out they couldn't fill the position for 6 months, and then they hired someone for 15,000 more than me and gave them the title. And that's where I'm like, wow, you guys literally lit 10 grand on fire and wasted 6 months and probably burned out a whole bunch of employees trying to cover for that 6 months.
Welcome to
But
sports.
that's the fallacy that we're trying to sell ourselves. I think and that's the cultural problem, is if you view all employees below like associate ADs as just replaceable components, then that needs to be the reality, which it isn't. So it just means that you're just wasting a ton of resources. And you guys talked about in the last episode about house settlement. I do think there's going to be a lot of hard questions about finances, and I don't want to dig into that, but I think there will be some questions about why did you fire this person if you end up having to spend more money to hire a replacement many months down the line. So that's going to be the challenge. Now, to speaking to that going forward, like one thing that I think like athletics is going to have to think about is how to be more flexible with employees. Like, we did a study in remote work. I'm sure a lot of you went through the experience of COVID. A lot of us did, where sport is such an interesting thing of everything was about presenteeism. You have to be here, you have to be seen. There's value in that. But we wanted to look at what happens during COVID when you can't be seen. Like, everyone had to, even for that short period of time, find a way to work from home. And it was challenging. Like, we found out there was lots of growing pains, but some people really loved it. And part of it was they kind of got separation from that culture, that negative culture in athletics. I do think athletics is going to have to think harder about how can they create more flexibility for middle management folks and up, to allow them to live their life, to have more family freedom, and to allow them to tap into some benefits while still asking them a whole lot, which I know that part isn't going to go away.
Sponsored by.
No Longer Credentialed is brought to you by Slim's Magic Carpet Ride. Just when you thought there wasn't a faster way out of Dodge, Slim's has you covered. We offer concierge service for athletic directors caught in the slimiest HR situations, especially the ones they created and don't have the guts to own. One call to Slim's and you're escaping to some luxurious overseas hideout before your HR rep even finishes covering it all up. Slim's Magic Carpet Ride, proudly serving every Power 4 college town, accountability not included.
We'd also like to welcome our newest sponsor of the show, We Build Moats. Got a CEO with some unchecked ideas and a real talent for wasting money? They like water, they like gates, they like boats, and now they want to keep their athletes from hitting the portal. Time to call We Build Moats. We turn those ridiculous little whims into unneeded capital projects. With high-tech facial recognition at every exit, motion sensor lasers in the watchtower that kick in the second someone even thinks about transferring, all powered by donor dollars and administrative staff cuts. At We Build Moats, we make sure your roster stays put. No exits, no freedom, just total control, because there's no escaping the most chaotic era of college sports.
Podcast. You get it.
Boggs, we know one person on this podcast that went through an extreme situation of that. And that's a fact. Not only were they cutting jobs in sports, but they were making you reapply for the same job. This is the kind of thing. That just sounds insane. That these are the things that are happening.
Yeah, Matt, I have a pie in the sky, never going to happen vision.
Let's hear it.
Of, one Saturday in the fall, Georgia's playing Alabama, and everybody at Sanford Stadium that's working the game leaves, and they just walk out. And it's not just walking out at Sanford Stadium; it's walking out in at Florida Field. It's walking out in Texas and in Oregon and all these other places. I kind of want, I guess I'm just wondering if there's ever going to be a solution to all of this, or is it just going to keep going? I think I've asked this already, but is it something drastic like people like unionizing or becoming just leaving for a day as a collective? Is that ever going to happen, or would that ever happen? Or did you hear that in surveys or anything like that?
I've definitely thought about like what are solutions, whether the solutions are like, yeah, like actually very doable to like what is something that could be aggressive that we need to like kind of open our eyes and ears to doing to make a change. I didn't necessarily ask about that, but I did have people that gave me some interesting solutions that work for them individually. I'll give you, for example, if someone said like, hey, I'd love to do vacations elsewhere, but I only do a vacation in Mexico because my boss believes that, and I purposely design it so I don't have service. So my family's realized that the only vacations we can do in Mexico because then I can't be reached. And then another person just did like, hey, my spouse and I do a dinner. Was it once a week, once every 2 weeks? And the deal is I have to leave my phone in my car under all circumstances. So these are like, there's workarounds that people notice that they have to either save themselves. I know, Bernie, you talked about the buy-in that you had and like that addiction, that behavioral addiction to like let work go. Some people have tried to find individual workarounds that work for them. I think the problem is that we aren't seeing the leadership passing down ideas to us. And I think that was a previous question of, we definitely have had leaders tell us, kind of doing that generational thing of like, hey, I made sacrifices. If I did it, you can do it. And some of it's like, well, your sacrifice, you decide not to have children. That's a pretty big sacrifice. And I guess if you decided your work is that important to you, then okay, like, but it's unfair to then burden everyone else to do the same sacrifices as part of making it. And that was some of the challenges. We saw a lot of people that have truly contorted their life in a way to do everything they think is necessary for their job. And those are the people that become senior leaders. And it's tough to then tear down the system to that. But I've come up with the bold ideas of, I said, like, I think an athletics, especially in the summer, should have it where like Wednesday, no one can send an email after noon. For the entire afternoon, if anyone sends an email, you will get in trouble. So you cannot send an email out. You're going to either have to come creativity, or the only emails come out is like if a player is in like a real crisis or like someone's in a crisis, like emergency, police, whatever. But beyond that, no one can send an email. You're going to have to get work done either by yourself, or you're just going to have to go and do something else. But I actually think big, bold ideas of like trying to disrupt that constant communication, it's tough. Like you carry around your phone everywhere. It's anyone can access you at any time. And it's the burden that you have to carry from that accessibility.
It's just hard for me. Sorry, Barca. It's hard for me to think that an AD who has all of this stuff, their job changes like every 3 days. You have the house settlement. You've got this, you've got that, you've got coaches, you've got zombie salaries, you've got all this other stuff. And like the last thing they want to think about is their staffer making $45,000 a year. It's not on their priority list. I've never been at a place where it was on a priority list. Barca, have you been anywhere? I mean, you've worked outside of the business where it was a number one priority, but in sports, it just seems it's at the bottom of the totem pole everywhere.
Agency life is the one job that I had where they were very tuned into culture because they were trying to nurture from their staff associates all the way up to their partner, because they were trying to retain their people and also develop their people within. And so, no job's perfect, but after seeing that, as you bring up, Boggs, there are places like out there, and let's not, I always say this to people younger in the industry: no job is perfect out there, and the more time that you work through something, you see what place has more pros and what place has more cons. So, what with your study, I'm really fascinated by this. I don't know how much you've gotten into this, or maybe this is some current work, Matt. I'm a Gen Xer, so to your point earlier, all I ever knew and was taught and trained from the baby boomers was just put your head down, do your work, good things will happen. Don't speak up. But there's some new trends we're slowly seeing in the industry, I feel like. And maybe some of that was COVID related. Maybe some of that is the work from home stuff now. But I feel a little pushback from maybe the millennials and especially Gen Z in work life balance, and maybe shifts that are coming that are going to be very, very slow as those generations start coming up in the workforce and start getting into more senior leadership. Do you feel like there's anything that you're seeing that maybe is slowly moving in the right direction, even if it's at a snail's pace because of Gen Z or millennials?
I I can't speak to the generational split. Obviously, yeah, I know enough about the boomers about, hey, a lot of them had one or two jobs, and that's just what they worked at. And obviously, that runs in conflict a lot of times with how you need to do the college sport industry. That you're expected to kind of jump around until you can get to a position that at least you feel comfortable with. I don't know if I would say that things are going to break because of generational differences, because the culture in college sport is so strong that it probably goes beyond that generational vibe. It'll be interesting to see, like, are we going to see more leaders that have families that are involved? Like, I'll bring up Marcus Freeman as an example. I don't know anything about him, but it sticks out to me that he has like a whole bunch of kids, like 5 kids,
Yeah.
6 kids. Don't quote me on the number, but like that sticks out because that is like so different. And so that's an interesting thing of like he is the decision maker for a ton of his staff. There's probably hundreds of staff that at any moment he can snap his fingers and they have to do whatever they have to do. But he also gets exposed to having so many kids. So is he more family friendly? That's what I'm hoping for, is in athletics, could we see people that actually have kids, grandkids, have extended families, and are actually having to make family decisions to then think about how culture is built for families within the system? Because that's the problem, is we have lots of ADs that decided not to have kids or don't have a spouse, or they got divorced, or their spouse is also working in athletics. So everyone's kind of bought in that they don't have to make the hard decisions because everyone's already on the same page. And that's not how that works for a lot of traditional and non-traditional families. And that's going to be the question of, if we can get more leadership within athletics that have family decisions, that also have to think about going to their kids' games, so therefore other people get to make those same choices, that's what will be that will be the situation that will help push us in the right direction.
I think some of it is, you'll see flashes of it in sports, but a lot of it's lip service. So it's like, again, it always goes up to senior management, leadership, and then also the coaches of like, hey, we want more work-life balance, and we want to give you off days every now and then that don't have to be comped, or figuring out what that workload schedule is. But it still comes down to, you're still getting those texts. We had someone on early on, Eric Jones, who's a longtime sports worker, who told this not great story, almost alarming, terrifying story about getting called from a football coach's right-hand person on Christmas Eve and Christmas, wanting ticket sale updates for the bowl game. Is there's no accountability or control. They can say one thing for lip service, but then you're still getting those calls and texts on Thanksgiving and late nights and everywhere. And so that's really the hard thing to overcome. It's these departments, or you have to have an athletic director that does more than just say, hey, we're just doing one quick seminar on mental health in sports, or we're bringing somebody in for massages in the afternoon if you want to take this as a service. And there's no real depth to it. There's not a lot of care to it. And it just seems like, and Boggs, to get your thoughts, like, I don't know, I'm a realist. I just don't know if real change is possible.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I just think it's like Matt, you said earlier, if there's 500 resumes for that assistant SID job to work volleyball and softball at Cincinnati, that's, you're not going to have any change. It's just supply and demand. I guess it just gets to a point where, can you accept what's happening? And if you can't, you have to get out. But then you try to get out, and then your skills don't really, I don't know. That's a whole nother story. I mean, we're two middle-aged guys who have sports-related backgrounds, and finding a job is kind of hard. And that's another talk for another day. But I just don't see any change. Like, what would be one thing you would recommend, your number one thing to ADs?
Oh man, number one thing. I don't know. I'd have to think about like what would be the priority. But one thing is I've said like there should be a family committee within each sport. So like if Brennan's the head football coach and he has a partner, I think it'd be good for that partner to have committees with other people's spouses that are in the team, because I do think that creates a conduit. Because it could be a situation where, like if I'm the head coach and I'm the person that sent Brennan the email about, hey, it's Christmas, Merry Christmas, but tell me what this ticket updates. Sometimes the best thing is then it could be my wife is the one that's like, why did you do that? And then it's like, then that's like the pushback is sometimes you build the family dynamic circles there of where people can talk about how their families are impacted by decisions. Then it gets into that person, the decision maker's family, and that provides them a time of like reckoning of like, wow, I made this decision. I viewed this only from business perspective, but it's family. So that was one thing is I still remember we interviewed some spouses that talked about like, my husband or my wife has to do these things because this head coach is deciding things and he has no idea, he or she has no idea how this is going to affect our family. And it's like, yeah, if those families had some interconnected webs, that they could actually have family discussions that show how, like sport is constantly talked about, we're in a family, like this is our family. And then that way they can see how this extended family, like a coach deciding the athletic trainer needs to come at 8 a.m. is affecting their spouse and their kids and their whole extended family. And those are decisions. Doesn't necessarily mean that a coach is going to choose anything different, but they need to face the consequences of a decision. And I think that's where like building family communities would be good. And it's not even just about basic things. Family communities could also help if you hire someone new, they have to come in, then they already have a built-in network. Like there's a ton of culture you can build on the family side that sport right now just ignores.
That's a really good point. It seems to me in the places where at least the sports that were the most successful to me, they genuinely had a family dynamic. Like I had a coach where his wife was all in, and they were all in on their recruits and their kids and their families, and his dad would show up and his brothers would show up, and it was just this huge family dynamic, and it was awesome. And kids, when they come in, they want to be a part of that. He's very, very successful, and I think that's one of the main reasons why that he is. I think that's a really good idea. I mean, we worked at a place where it was in the middle of an urban city, it's kind of an urban area, and to live close, you couldn't afford it. And so we were all like 45 minutes away, like Barca, you live 25 minutes away. I live 40, and then somebody lived 30 in another direction and 30 in another direction. So just like getting together was just super, super hard. And I think it makes a big difference if you can do that.
And the more I've thought about this, I guess if an AD was like, give me one thing that we should do, I would say you really need to be purposeful with your summertime. Mm-hmm. Like find ways to have people fully unplug, because it's going to pay off in the fall and the winter and spring when things are really tough and people had an extended time where they can unplug. Like be intentional, go around to each unit and force them to come up with a schedule where they be fully released. And it's like, I get that the thought is there's like, well, I'm paying those people. It's like, I'm telling you, you're going to get your 80 hours. Like you're going to get weeks, multiple weeks worth of time later. That's not the concern. You need to think about how to pace these folks, because right now we're making people go out at a sprinting speed to run a marathon. And it's more of, if we can give them a month where it's like, hey, academic staff, in June, I need you guys to find a way to shut down for 2 weeks, because it's going to pay off later when we really have to make, we really are going to push you hard. That's where I would say, like, you need to use summer in a way that they aren't thinking about conscientiously right now.
Right.
I think the dirty secret in sports, though, and what it's come to is there is no off season, and these departments will, they will say, like, we can talk about college sports, for instance. The College World Series just ended, and now they're gearing up for football camp, and now there's pressure of selling season tickets for the first game that usually comes around Labor Day weekend. And it's just what I found from agency life, and it's something I'll get into more in a future episode, is, in that world, it was all about billing. So you had to track all of your hours. And I think you bring up a wonderful point, Matt. And I think senior leadership is going to need to find a way to track hours of everybody in the department. The partners used to get a report every Monday morning. And actually the whole staff would, to see how many hours everybody was billing, whether it was high or low. We would have moments in staff meetings where the partner would ask, 100 people, who's got too much on their work plate this week and needs help? And also, who doesn't have enough work on their plate and can jump in and help on these clients? And to me, that was just very refreshing. The culture was built that way. And that's never happened in sports. But that's where the partners of a firm, they determined how important that was. And I agree with you 100%. I think that's a great idea.
So, Matt, let's talk about what you're working on now. I'm very curious to see or to listen to kind of what you're focusing on in this space, and some of the projects you're looking at.
Yeah, and I appreciate getting a chance to kind of go over that. Some of this I've already gone over, but one is that we're still working on getting this spouse paper where we talked about people that are partners about like, hey, you don't even have to work in sport. You didn't really sign up for this, even though you kind of did. And how is your life changing? And for a lot of people, it was like, yeah, I've had to quit my job, or I've had to essentially know that my career will be mitigated in the sense of I just know that we're going to have to move in a year or two. So there's only so much I can commit to doing with my career. So that means that my career will be stunted, or I'm working less hours. Or some people just like, hey, I was really enjoying my career, but we'd realize that I had to be a stay-at-home dad or stay-at-home mom because that's just what we had to do. But then some of those people really are missing community, and that's what brought up the family stuff of we've had to go from Lubbock, Texas to Knoxville, Tennessee to Wichita, Kansas. It's like it's tough to build friendships and have your kids be in a community and do like sign up for T-ball and stuff because you're just having to move all the time. And as you guys alluded to in the last episode, house settlement, now there's even more the fear of like, hey, it's not even just about me searching for a new job for promotion. Now it just might be out of existentialism that I need to find a new position because who knows, I might be told that I got 6 months and then they're going to essentially end my position. And so these are all the challenges that are going on. We have another paper on grit, which is grit is something that's constantly brought up in sport about you just need to persevere. And so we're kind of looking at like how grit is an important component within college sport. And then the other one I told you about is we did a lot of interviews. I have all kinds of new data with biometrics that I'm really interested to dive into to see how people's physical health was affected. Because right now there's very little data, not even just in college sport, but in general about how traditional work experiences affect your physical health. So we're looking into that. And then the last one is these former employees. We interviewed a bunch of former employees, asked why they left. What was the tipping point of when they decided they were going to get out? Was there transition times? What were the eluding situations that created those? Trying to learn about essentially these people that have decided to get out and potentially were really good at their job and what sport essentially can learn from their experiences.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, that sounds so good.
Well, thanks.
You're touching on all of the things that we've experienced ourselves, either personally or other people in our lives. And, I've seen it firsthand how I made work the priority over the spouse. I think the fact that you're digging in, nobody even talks. People don't talk about just how crazy the culture is in this industry, at least publicly. We all talk about it in our inner circles. You don't want to get blackballed or lose your job or any of those things. But the spouses and what they deal with is, I just think about all the damage I did because of that. And I have a lot of regret, depression, anger at myself. I just think that's just a group and an audience that never has a voice.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys have noticed, or even for the audience, now the NFL Players Association does like a report card for organizations about, forgot what it's like, family issues, health, nutrition, like weight room stuff. It's for players. It's like a focusing on players, thinking about organizations. I've been thinking for years about trying to do something like a report card for athletics, because in some ways it's like, well, athletics is a very competitive based business. So if I give University of Cincinnati like a C minus, part of me believes that they'll have a meeting to figure out how to do better. And it's like, if we have to shame them into performing better for their employees, there's probably some value there. So I've thought about like and it doesn't have to be me, anyone can run with that idea, but like creating a report card for organizations, at least for as many people that are willing to respond. Because trust me, I had qualitative responses. I'm not going to out any universities here, where people just wrote like, blank university is the absolute worst. Anyone reading this never worked there. And it's like, well, I'm not going to work there, but I appreciate that you felt so strongly to just mention them by name. And to me, it's like, that's really important. But to me, and Barker, you mentioned something about this earlier. We had a ton of people that said their supervisor made their job, like really made their job livable, enjoyable, appreciative. there was so much power in supervisor that people were like, hey, it's not about working at University of Cincinnati. It's about working for Jane Doe. She makes everything about my job like enjoyable, controllable, survivable. And to me, that's where it's like I almost want to like try to find like, hey, the unheralded great supervisor people, colleagues, those are the people that really need the shout outs because they're the ones doing it day to day to make it a really enjoyable experience.
Why isn't this issue being talked about more? You're doing the research, and love everything that you're saying and what you're putting out there in the follow-up studies. And people are leaving the industry at an alarming rate, and just nobody seems to care or notice.
Yeah, I have big thoughts on that. I felt like about 3 years ago, I would say we have traction like in applied to research. I feel like there was real discussions going on about the work environment just in general within sport. I think at the time, like remote work was potentially getting clawed back. So people were trying to express some benefits. But now I think house settlement has people so spooked about what the future is that everyone's afraid to complain about their job per se because they're worried if their job is going to exist. And that's where I'm interested to see is like, are athletic departments still going to want to think about how to make things better, or are they really going to be focused for the next 18 months about a financial perspective of what those jobs look like? And I'd say, yes, people should be cautious. Like I would understand the concern and stress. Like you have to put food on the table, you got to pay bills. So you have to do what's best for you. And obviously that means I don't want it to sound like I'm telling you to put your head down. Everyone needs to make a business decision truly for themselves. But I do think it's important to think about like what's good and bad about your job. But on the flip side, I'd say, speaking to both of you, also don't be afraid to look for jobs outside of sport. I know that's scary. For a lot of people, it can feel like way too much to even comprehend. But if you need to talk to people, I guess the one positive about having so much turnover is you probably know some folks that have gotten out and they can talk to you about their experiences. So now might be a good time to learn about that. Even if you don't want to make the leap, just talk to people that have gotten out, see what their experience is like, and you may decide that it's for you because you might find out you're going to get paid more, you have to work less, and you can still be connected to some of your community, can still work in sport. But to me, it's like, yeah, don't be afraid to push back on things that you think are going to be beneficial. But also think that sport doesn't have to be something you have to do for the rest of your life.
Boggs, that's like us. We were locked in Alcatraz and we're like, should we really make a swim for it with the sharks? Can we get back to land and see if we can survive?
It's tough. I mean, it's a grind when you're in it and you think about leaving, but then something keeps you there. You know, it's like the passion and something just keeps you.
Yeah, and I don't want to keep extending, but I did have someone in this new study, former employees, they were like, yeah, every time someone left, I just thought that they were like a loser. They couldn't do it, or they couldn't survive. And I looked at them so negatively. And then they're like, then it dawned on me that I was the idiot. I was the person that was portraying my thoughts onto them. And it was like, yeah, the light bulb came on. So it's more of like, you can never force someone to do that, but it's more about just get information, talk to other people. And you might realize, yeah, how you're perceiving those people as a weakness might just be that you're the one that's doing something that you could easily be doing something more beneficial.
Yep.
That's the lifelong sports mindset of no pain, no gain, and just that machoism, right? Of not showing weakness, and it's horrible. And I agree. I look back to my 20s and even 30s on some things. I was like, man, I was really, really contributing to the problem. We want to be mindful of your time. You know, obviously we're two guys that, we have this podcast and try to be pretty transparent with our audience. And we obviously personify your research as two long burnouts and two people too stupid to pull the ripcord and leave the business, and eject. Is there anything you want to ask us?
So here's something to speak to me, and I can talk to your audience. I'm a grad of Grand Valley State. If anyone's heard of Grand Valley State, it's a D2 school up in West Michigan. And I was an athlete there. My wife was an athlete there. And I want to give her a shout out. She's getting in the Hall of Fame this fall, so I'm excited. Yeah,
great.
She was an incredible soccer player. And please don't look up my stats for baseball. We'll just leave it at that. But it's interesting to me that I see a lot of perception that D2 and D3 jobs are not for long. They're just like stepping stones. And part of me, I think, like, why is that? Why do people in college sports only want to work at the Georgias or the Notre Dames, or pick your school that you see on TV instead of a school that's like Springfield College or Findlay or like University of Findlay? Because to me, it's like sometimes when I talk to those people, I feel like their job's really enjoyable because they've they've kind of made it, they know how to make it work day to day. But so like that's part of the question I wanted to ask about culturally, why do we have that disconnect?
I think, to me, it's just the notoriety of working for a big team, like being on TV all the time and dealing with ESPN and working a football game with 110,000 people, and just the rush of just kind of being in the mix of all of these important players. But like the D2 and D3 lifestyle, it appeals to me, but it doesn't appeal to me because I think you'd be doing everything. At least if you're an SEC school, there's 10, I was in communications, there's 10 comms guys, and you're responsible for basketball and golf. And you do help with the other sports when needed, but for the most part, when you're not in season, it's kind of, and the pay's more. And but I will say, I mean, we have a friend whose son played Division III soccer, and he absolutely loved it. He loved everything about it. It was like the essential student athlete experience. And so that is very appealing to me, because this NIL thing, I mean, we could talk for 3 hours of what we think what's college sports is going to look like in 10 years. I don't think anybody knows, but so that's kind of, you kind of weigh with the good with the bad, but I think people just want to be, where the action is, where people care. So that would be
Yeah,
my
it's
thing.
part of it is the identity. I mean, I remember going to a national brand, actually worldwide brand, and every social media post I put out was reaching 1 million people. And there's an addiction there as well, an obsession. When the lights are bright and that's what people are leaning to. But maybe with this House settlement, maybe we're going to start to see some people shuffle back to D2, D3, where it becomes more about the sport again. I'm really curious to see how this plays out, because there's going to be so much. There's already pressure in these Power Fours, even more pressure now with the revenue generation and the numbers. And as these departments truly, truly now turn to business models.
You guys bring up a good point. If we definitely had comments about like, I have to do everything. Like I have to do a lot of different roles. Just one thing that stuck out to me is it definitely feels like there's less pressure about phone calls in the middle of the night and having to be on all the time. And it does make me wonder, you guys are absolutely right. We don't know what House settlement ultimately, like how things are going to shake out. But it does make me wonder if some D2, D3 jobs might become more attractive for people in the long term, because it's like, hey, I don't have to deal with NIL there. I don't have to deal with as much pressure about our jobs disappearing due to budgetary reasons at these schools. But I also wouldn't say like I'd be certain about that, but it's just something that stuck out of, I can tell like the people that are at Drake University, which is even like a really solid Division I, they still are thinking about, I want to work at University of Iowa. And it's like, it's the similar identity of how schools are perceived by athletes is a similar structure designed for employees.
We do want to thank you for your time, Matt, for coming on here and really discussing your work and sharing with us your research. It's so important. I think anybody in athletics, especially senior leadership, ownership, management, needs to read these studies and really truly understand these numbers and this data and what's coming back from all of this. And you really are, in our opinion, doing the Lord's work on this.
100%.
And so thank you. And if there's any way we can ever be of help, just let us know. But we appreciate you really taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thanks. And for any audience out there, you want to connect, like you can look me up on LinkedIn for Matt Huml. It's HUML, and I'm on Twitter. I post a lot of. I'm from Chicago, so you might see me droll on about how the Bulls are constantly winning just 38 games a year, and the Bears are constantly struggling. And so ignore that Schadenfreude's comments about my Chicago sport teams, but I still post a lot of my articles and work over there. But happy to connect, especially if you want me to talk to you or like your organization if you're still in the system. I'd love to have those conversations, because even if we are talking about house settlement, building good culture, there's like it's an omnipresent thing that we need to be working on.
Time to wrap it up.
And that's another edition of No Longer Credentialed. Thanks to all of you listening, and if you like it, tell a friend and give it a 5-star rating on your podcast app of choice. Don't forget to check us out on social media at NLC Pod on X, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. Until next week, keep grinding.